For decades, the world was told that Padre Pio's final warnings were sealed, forgotten, or too dangerous to reveal. But now, in this very hour, the three final signs he left behind are beginning to unfold, one after another. And as they begin to stir from the silence of secrecy, a name long spoken in whispers among the faithful begins to echo across the halls of prophecy. Cardinal Luis Tagle. They called him the Asian Francis, the gentle shepherd from Manila, the theologian with a soft voice and a weeping heart. But heaven does not weigh men as the world does. For beneath the kindness, behind the tears, the eyes of heaven have seen a soul placed, whether knowingly or unknowingly, at the center of a divine collision. The veil is thinning, the signs are multiplying, and Tagle now walks among those who, Padre Pio warned, would play a crucial role in the Church's final confrontation between truth and deception. Only days ago, under the quiet ceremony of the Vatican's sacred walls, Pope Leo XIV did something no one expected. He elevated Cardinal Tagle to the suburbicarian Diocese of Albano, a title of immense spiritual and ecclesiastical significance, a title previously held by the Pope himself. Most saw it as routine, but prophecy never shouts to the crowd. It speaks in whispers, in symbols, in the rearranging of stars and titles, until the humble recognize what the proud dismiss. Albano was not just an elevation. It was a heavenly signal, a spiritual transfer of weight, a divine recalibration. And then, like lightning striking twice, Cardinal Tagle began to speak. In a Vatican news interview, he spoke glowingly of the new Pope, Leo XIV. But there was more, far more. He reaffirmed that under this new pontificate, there would be no turning back from the path laid by Francis. A path of inclusion, of missionary zeal, of reaching the poor and marginalized. But behind the words, something deeper lingered. A confirmation, perhaps, that the trajectory was locked in, that the ship would not be turning. And in Padre Pio's final writings, the ones buried in archives, smuggled through whispers, it was this very kind of trajectory that he warned would bring the Church to a crossroad so devastating that even angels would weep. Cardinal Tagle's heart may be full of good intentions, but the road to prophecy is not always paved with intention. Sometimes it is paved with silence, with choices made in hidden rooms, with songs sung in innocence that stir up storms in heaven. For those with eyes to see, the clip of Tagle singing John Lennon's Imagine was more than controversial. It was revelatory. Imagine no heaven, no religion. For some, it was a harmless outreach. For others, it was a moment where the invisible trembled, where a servant of the cloth sang the anthem of the age that will erase all sacred boundaries. But Padre Pio warned of this, that in the days before the final shaking, even good men would be caught in the tides of spiritual confusion, that even beloved shepherds might unknowingly become harbingers of division. And now, as the dicastery for evangelization expands its reach with Tagle at its helm, the mission field becomes more than just global, it becomes prophetic. The first sign, the elevation to Albano. The second sign, the public reaffirmation of the irreversible path. And the third sign, it is still forming, still trembling in the womb of time. But the eyes of prophecy see it coming. It may arrive as a vote, a papal gathering, a sudden death, or a global call to unity that blurs the holy with the human. Padre Pio saw it. He wrote of a moment when the collar and the crown would touch, and fire would descend upon the house that once held light. Tagle's role may not be one of direct rebellion. That is not what the signs show. What they reveal is something more terrifying, participation through sincerity. A well-meaning bishop swept into events too vast for one man to see. For the final deception, Padre Pio said, would not come dressed in darkness. It would come wrapped in compassion, in eloquence, in missionary zeal, in men who believe they are doing God's work, even as the altar trembles beneath them. And so, the question hangs over the faithful like a thundercloud. Is Cardinal Tagle being positioned by heaven or by something else? Is he the voice of unity in a divided world, or the fulfillment of a sign foretold by one of the most beloved mystics in the history of the Church? The truth may not be found in headlines. It may not be whispered in Vatican corridors. It may only be found on your knees where the Spirit still speaks to the hearts of those who do not wish to be deceived. This message is not speculation. It is not politics. It is prophecy in motion. The Church stands on the edge of a spiritual crossroads. Do not be deceived by appearances. Watch. Listen. Pray with holy fear. The Lord is calling his remnant. The signs are manifesting. The faithful must choose whom they follow, not by sight, but by truth. And truth, as Padre Pio always said, is not determined by popularity. It is revealed in fire. And now the fire is spreading. Even now, as you hear these words, the Vatican itself is shifting. Silent reshuffling behind solemn doors. A new pope, a new power dynamic. And standing quietly in the background, but not unnoticed by heaven, is Luis Antonio Tagle. Not just as a cardinal, not just as a bishop, but now as the Cardinal-Bishop of Albano. One of the most ancient, most symbolically potent titles in the entire Roman Catholic Church. This is not merely ceremonial. No, it is strategic. It is prophetic. It is timed. Because Albano is no ordinary title. Historically, the Suburbicarian sees, those ancient dioceses that surround Rome, are reserved only for the highest, most powerful members of the College of Cardinals. And when the title of Albano is passed, it often signals something more than status. It signals succession, transition, preparation. For those who study prophecy, this is no small detail. Padre Pio once described a moment when the hand of Peter would pass the oil to one whose lips were familiar, but whose mission was not fully understood. Could it be that the oil has already been passed? In the days since his elevation, Cardinal Tagle's voice has taken on a new tone. He speaks not only of service and humility, but of irreversibility. He declared in an interview that the Church's commitment to the poor, to outreach, to the direction of Pope Francis's legacy cannot be reversed. And while these words may inspire many, they echo something far deeper in the realm of the Spirit. For prophecy warns not only of direction, but of momentum. Once a train begins to roll down the mountain, it cannot stop without either crashing or being lifted by divine intervention. Now ask yourself, why Tagle? Why now? He is not the most senior, not the most outspoken. And yet, name after name falls from consideration for the next papacy, and his remains, silent, steady, untouched, like a candle preserved for a specific night. A night no one expects. A night where darkness begins to fall, and only one light is permitted to shine, whether by heaven's mercy or judgment. But this is no attack on a man. This is a revelation of patterns. Tagle's rise began with kindness, with empathy, with smiles that disarmed even critics. But as Padre Pio warned, the greatest deception in the final days will not wear horns. It will wear a halo. It will appeal not to sin, but to compassion. And the faithful will be torn, not by force, but by confusion. Because what if the man chosen is beloved? What if he speaks of mercy? What if he weeps in public and touches the poor and calls for peace? Would you recognize the signs then? Or would you say, surely this cannot be the fulfillment of the warning? What if the danger lies not in the man, but in the moment? Already whispers are growing. Within Vatican circles, within mission organizations, that Tagle, if not the next pope, will be the one who makes way for the man who is. That he will be the bridge between Francis and the final transformation. The man who opens the door, even if he never walks through it. And what does prophecy say about bridges? Padre Pio saw a time when The bridge would appear safe, but beneath its boards crawled fire. He said this would be the most deceptive era in church history, when the enemy would not attack from outside the walls but would whisper from within them. Luis Tagle has served faithfully, but the Spirit warns, do not confuse faithfulness with favor. Judas kissed Jesus, Peter denied him, and yet both believed they were doing what was right. The third and final sign, the one not yet made public, may come as a shock. For in the depths of the Vatican there is movement, unseen. Whispers that certain voices are being gathered, that meetings once labeled missionary now discuss unity between faiths in a way never seen before. One name appears repeatedly, Tagle, not as the architect, but as the face, the bridge, the key that unlocks the gate. And if this gate opens, it will not close again. You must understand, prophecy is not about hatred. It is not about slander. It is about warning. And the greatest warnings come not to condemn, but to prepare, to open the eyes of the remnant, to remind the faithful that even within the holiest walls, men are still men, and men can be used by both light and shadow. So what do? You do what the early saints did. You pray with fire in your lungs. You fast not to be seen, but to hear. You search the word, you discern the fruit. You remember that Christ's bride is not for sale, not to roam, not to progress, not to fear. If Padre Pio saw this, and the signs say he did, then we must ask, what did he want us to do? The answer was always the same. Stay close to the cross, stay hidden in the truth, and when the signs begin, do not run, stand, and testify. Because the time of testing is not coming. It has already begun, and still the signs multiply. As the Church clings to its breath beneath marble ceilings and centuries-old frescoes, heaven is already speaking, not with thunder, but with tremors. Tremors that shake no columns, yet rattle the bones of the discerning. For those who have eyes to see, the elevation of Cardinal Tagle is not the end of something. It is the beginning. He now bears a title few have held, Cardinal-Bishop of Albano, a role intertwined with papal legacy. A role that, in the spiritual realm, often whispers of proximity to the chair of Peter. When a pope chooses to pass his former diocese into the hands of another, it is not just transition. It is symbolic. Succession. Pope Leo XIV has chosen, and what he has passed on may be more than a title. It may be the torch. But what fire will that torch carry? There is a reason that Padre Pio wept in silence when he wrote about the final signs. He spoke of a man who will rise not by thunder, but by softness, not by sword, but by song, and his rising shall precede a tearing in the veil. How eerily that mirrors the trajectory of Luis Tagle, a man of immense gentleness, with a voice calm as still water, now drifting ever closer to the center of spiritual power. But as every prophet knows, still water can run deep. And when deep, waters are stirred by unseen winds, entire nations can be swept away. Already the faithful are divided. Some believe Tagle is a vessel of light, a fulfillment of unity, a healing balm to a world in chaos. Others sense something different. Not evil, but imbalance. Not deception, but a softness that cannot hold when the floodwaters rise. That in his desire to unify, he may forget the sword of the word and reach instead for the cup of compromise. Could that be the third sign Padre Pio foresaw? A church that trades clarity for compassion, that drapes truth in ambiguity, that bends the knee not to the lamb, but to the longing of the age. In this very moment, as the dicastery for evangelization stretches across continents, its leader, Cardinal Tagle, is urging the faithful to rediscover Christ through personal encounter. And on the surface, this is pure and noble. But ask yourself, which Christ? the Christ of the Scriptures, or the Christ of modern reinterpretation. For Padre Pio warned with trembling hands that in the final hour, another Christ will be preached, not in name but in nature, and many will follow him gladly, not knowing they have left the path. Could this be why the cries of the saints have grown louder in the Spirit? Could this be why visions are returning, why the faithful are dreaming of shaking churches, of weeping statues, of thrones crumbling under the weight of gold? Because heaven is not waiting, it is warning. And the Vatican, though cloaked in silence, is moving pieces like a chessboard carved in shadow. Every appointment, every shift, every statement is a step toward something. Toward what? A unification, a coronation, a reckoning. No one knows for certain. But the timing is uncanny. The National Eucharistic Congress is nearing. The highway to heaven. Initiative is stirring. And now at the very edge of these events, Tagle, newly crowned with Albano, prepares to speak, to travel, to represent not just Rome, but the face of faith itself. Do you see it yet? The stage is being set. The curtain is almost open, and behind it, a drama older than time begins again. The war between light and counterfeit light, between the remnant and the many, between the bride and the impostor. And still the world sleeps. But you must not. For if Padre Pio truly saw this moment, if the veil was lifted for just long enough for him to pen the final warnings, then this is not just news. It is a trumpet, and if the trumpet sounds unclear, the faithful fall into confusion. But if it is heard for what it truly is, then the remnant rises, then the sleepers awaken, then the oil is poured into lamps, and the bride prepares herself. The Cardinal. Time for neutrality has passed. He who stands at the crossroads, whether Tagle or another, must be measured not by applause, but by alignment. Alignment with the spirit of truth, with the teachings that cannot be rewritten, with the fire that does not flatter. For even now, as Vatican courtyards echo with footstep, and now, the breath of heaven grows heavy. For the hourglass has not run dry, but its final grains are shifting with divine precision, each one a heartbeat, a moment, a breath between revelation and reckoning. And as the Church walks unknowingly across the threshold of prophecy, the man who has been clothed in humility, elevated in silence, and adorned with the title of Albano, stands not as a bystander, but as a hinge. Cardinal Luis Tagle is not evil. No demon lurks behind his smile. No heresy drips from his tongue. And that is precisely why the hour is so dangerous. For the final deception, Padre Pio once whispered, would not come wrapped in red or black. It would come draped in white, in sincerity, in glowing speech and universal applause. It would feel right. It would sound right. But it would be wrong. Heaven's warning is not about a man, it is about a moment when truth and imitation collide, when the holy and the hollow look almost identical, when the wolves dress not in sheep's clothing, but in the garments of shepherds. And Tagle, beloved by East and West, hailed by secular magazines and sacred councils alike, finds himself at the epicenter of it all. This is not an accident. This is not politics. This is prophecy in motion. Look closer. While the world focuses on headlines, the Spirit calls attention to patterns. Look not at what is said, but what is echoed. Look not at who applauds, but who remains silent. Look not at what changes, but what is slowly erased. Because Padre Pio wrote of a time when a great silence shall precede the cry, and the cry, he said, would come from within. A cry not of blasphemy, but of redefinition, not of denial, but of misdirection. A cry that would say, we are all one, while hiding the blade behind unity. A cry that would promise peace, even if it meant crucifying truth a second time. And in the shadow of this cry, Tagle stands. Not as its author, but as its echo. Already in conferences and speeches, the tone has shifted. Unity, yes. But at what cost? Mercy, yes. But detached from justice? Mission, yes. But built not on Christ crucified, but on Christ rebranded, and all of it is happening under the perfect storm. Pope Leo XIV, newly crowned, reshaping the landscape. The third secret of Fatima, once again stirring in the hearts of those who remember what was hidden. The global push for spiritual integration, the tension between tradition and reformation, and now, the rise of a bishop whose heart reaches across every divide, whose presence is felt in every continent, whose face now mirrors the future. But a mirror can reflect, or it can mask. And heaven, in its mercy, is shouting in cymbals. The elevation to Albano? A transfer of spiritual DNA. The declaration of no turning back. A sealing of trajectory. The praise from both church and world? The hallmark of the final threshold. This is the moment where decisions are made in silence, not in Rome, but in the hearts of men. Because in prophecy, the players do not always know their role. Pharaoh did not know his heart would be hardened. Judas did not know his kiss would echo through eternity. And Tagle may not know that the hour he walks into is no longer ordinary. It is sacred. And it is final. And now, the twist no one expected. What if this was not about the papacy at all? What if Tagle was never meant to become pope, but to prepare the world for the one who will, the one who comes after, the one who is watching from the shadows, the one whose rise has not yet begun, but whose time is written not in ink, but in fire? What if Cardinal Tagle is the final forerunner? The last candle before the counterfeit sun, the voice before the dragon speaks in silk, the bridge, not to glory, but to decision, not for him, but for us. Because now the veil is lifting, and heaven does not ask who is famous. It asks, who will? Remain faithful? You are not watching a man. You are witnessing a moment, and once it passes, it will not return. The final sign is not a comet. It is a choice, and it begins now.